We're
Hi.
live.
Oh, we're live. Hello, everybody. Sorry, it's been a little bit of a rocky start today, but I'm here. I'm here. Happy to be here with Christy Willis, and welcome to this edition of our Get Untethered Hangout. I am Stacy Harmon, and Christy and I are co-authors of Untethered with Evernote. I've got a copy of it here, and this is our monthly hangout designed to orient you in 1 hour to the deeper concepts that we explain in the book and give you guys some real-life workflows and case studies that kind of supplement what we discuss in the book. And today we're talking about a topic near and dear to both of us, one of the core benefits of Evernote, best practices for collaborating with Evernote. We have a great session planned for you today. I'm really encouraged by some of the cool things that are happening with Evernote and some of the workflows that we're seeing. So we're going to cover some of the things that are in the book, but also there have been some new workflows that we've discovered since we wrote the book that are just really smart, and we want to orient you to. So how today's going to kind of work, let me give you a little bit of background information. Both Christy and I are Evernote ambassadors as well as Evernote business certified consultants, and we collaborated to write the book to really show not necessarily the skill set, which is important about Evernote, but also how the workflows should be laid out, which is really an art form, we think, and there's no right or wrong solution. There's a lot of options, and we really want to illustrate that for you, and that's an important discussion today in particular when we're talking about collaborating with Evernote. Christy and I also both spoke at Evernote conference in October in San Francisco, and the topic of my discussion was actually seamless teamwork and collaborating with Evernote. So there's a link at the end of this to that full presentation as well as slides, and we may make reference to that to kind of shoot you over there if you have further questions about that. And today we're going to really focus on a couple of key workflows that we discuss and introduce in the book. Christy's going to give you some of the basics and the core skill sets that you need in order to understand it so that we don't make any assumptions about what kind of skill level you're at. And then we're going to both move into showing you a couple of workflows that we have found both very effective in our personal management as well as with clients. I'm going to show you some case studies from some client work that I think are really neat as well. And we have a Q&A pod here. We are happy to take live questions and field those as we go along. And you can follow us also. I'm going to share my screen and show you a couple of the social things and some of the history that we've got as well. And so let me just do that for you. Hold on just a second. That's Christy and me, and as well as our websites if you have any questions as we kind of go along. But the next thing is this is one in a series, and this is our 7th one already. Can you believe it, Christy?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And you can see some of the tasks that we've delved, or some of the items and topics that we've really delved into in the past. And we have a playlist at youtube.com/Get Untethered, so you can go back and review any of those over the course of a time frame that works for you. So we encourage you to do that and keep up with us and subscribe to our YouTube channel to kind of be kept in the loop on future ones, as well as our Google Plus channel. That's the main vehicle for finding out about our next one. We do them on a monthly basis. You can also keep up with the Get Untethered community on Facebook, on Google+, YouTube, Twitter, and obviously on the web. We have an ongoing discussion about the evolution of Evernote as well as best practices for using Evernote in your business and personal life. And our big announcement before we kind of get into the main content is Christy and I are really honored to have been selected as one of only 3 Evernote books that's available in the Evernote market on the Evernote website. So all of you can log right into your own Evernote account, go to the Market tab, and you'll be able to see our book. They have a different cover on it, but it's the same exact great content, no matter if you purchase it through the Evernote website or through getuntethered.com. But we are just thrilled to kind of see it there and have Evernote say that it's worthy of the market. So we're thrilled, and thank you all for your support in that, and please spread the word. We'd love it, and hopefully we're helping you in the process. Before I pass it over to Christy to kind of give you some of the key skills that are needed and introduce a couple of the workflows, we want to set the ground and some of the foundation for which Evernote product you really should be on to have effective collaboration. And Evernote has this great chart that they recently posted in the forum, which I can assume they're also going to update on a regular basis, and we'll put the link in the replay so that you guys can access that. But it really, for those of you that aren't aware, there's 3 versions of Evernote. Free, premium, and business, and they have this chart which really shows the difference. The thing to know is you can share any note with anyone at any time, no matter what version you're on. So Evernote has the ability to share the data that you put in it with Evernote users and non-Evernote users. But when you step up into the place of actually doing project management and having team workflows associated with your business or your personal life, you really want to make the investment to go to Evernote Premium, which is going to be $5 a month or $45 a year. Or if you are a business owner and you're really interested in retaining the intellectual property and the data that is used with your business workflows, you're going to want to go into the Evernote Business tier, which is $10 a user a month. This is going to allow for editing of notes by other people that are involved in your workflow, and really worth the investment for the upgrade. Collaboration is one of those places that Evernote's power greatly expands when you upgrade to the premium or the free version. So again, a lot of what we talk about today is going to focus on the premium and business versions and the workflows there, because we're making the assumption that other people can edit notes and and share a workspace with you, which is really the next concept that I want to kind of cover. And that is that you can share actual notebooks through all of the versions, but the premium and business, you'll notice that the verbiage is slightly different. So when you're looking at premium, when you get to the publish, you can publish that notebook and allow anyone with access to the link to view it, and that's how you can share with, say, an assistant. And let me just clarify something. I don't want to muddy the waters. If you are a premium user and you share a notebook with a free user, they can still edit the note. Okay? The key is that one person has to be a premium user. The person, the owner of the notebook, needs to be a premium or business user. Okay, so let me just clarify that. The business version, the publishing works a little bit different. I think, Christy, you're going to get into that a little bit later in the presentations. But note that depending on what version you're on, your published version is going to function slightly differently, and there's slight modifications in the interface. So let me move on. Click. Okay. The key concept that's really kind of setting the stage, though, is that we want to think of notebooks as collaborative workspaces. So Evernote notebooks are going to be a spot where you can invite other people to interact with you. And this is very supportive of Evernote's new philosophy that they're positioning about being your modern workspace, where modern knowledge workers really do 4 activities. We write, we collect, we find, and we present. And Evernote is the software tool that's really going to allow you to do all those things in a collaborative way with other Evernote and non-Evernote users. So one of the things that we want to embrace is the fact that how you are doing these things is going to impact how you structure these notebooks. So one of the key considerations, and Christy will probably reiterate this as we go through, is, you know, who do you need to share with? Who needs to access things? Do they need to edit or not, or view only? These kinds of things are permissions that you can assign to the notebook, and you want to design your workspaces around what the answers to some of those questions are. And we cover those questions in detail in our book so that you can kind of walk yourself through the process of selecting a workflow that's going to work best for you. And as we go through the workflows that we present, I want to also encourage you to know that you can mix and match these in your Evernote account. You know, not one workflow might be all that you're going to use. You might be able to add these depending on what you're trying to accomplish throughout the workflow, and tailor it to what your business needs are. Okay? So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Christy. She can add her own perspective on that, and then kind of bring you guys up to speed with what the core skills are that are going to allow you to really execute some of the cool workflows that we're both going to discuss in a minute. Good morning, Christy.
Good morning. Can you unshare your screen so I can share mine?
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Stacy. That's a great overview of what we're going to be going through, and Stacy and I thought it would be helpful for those of you who are power users. You know all this, but we just wanted to hit the highlights for those of us who are newer to Evernote, of some of the key skills that you want. And we talk about these in detail in the book, but when we are looking at collaboration, we are really talking about, how do I share information with others, how do we both give input, and how do I know where the other person is with the work. And so the tools that you might use within Evernote for that range from the checklist and tables, copying to notebooks, reminders, note linking, the activity feed, presentation node, you name it. I want to hit a couple of highlights from that. So if you aren't familiar with these items, again, we go over them in the book. They're talked about on the Evernote website, but these are some of the core skill sets to be able to share effectively with other people. So let's hit a few highlights of those, and a big one, which Stacy already talked about, is sharing. And so there are a couple of different ways that I can share. I can share notebooks, or I can share notes individually. With notebooks, how I share my notebooks will depend on whether it's a personal notebook or a business notebook. And I've shown two different examples here that are for the same project, a project that I'll talk about a little bit more detail here in a minute. We are writing a cookbook at KW Solutions Group. So I've had a blog for about 7 years, and we've decided to write a cookbook. And there are several notebooks involved in that cookbook, and one of them is a recipes notebook. Now this notebook, even though it's for a company project, we created as a personal notebook. And the reason for that is that eventually we're going to get to recipe testing, and I'm going to want to be able to share that entire notebook very easily with people outside of the company through a public link. And so we wanted that to be something that we could quickly share without having to invite each person individually. And so we created that as a personal notebook. And then you can see that I've invited Lillian, who is our production manager, and Sandra, our photographer, to this notebook individually. The other notebook that you see on the right is our project notebook, and this is where we're doing all the organizing work. We don't need people, a lot of people outside the company, to be able to get into it. Lillian and I have invited Sandra to be part of that notebook, who is outside the company Evernote store, but she can still work with it. But that is not something that we would need to share publicly. So it was very clear that we wanted to make that a business notebook, to be able to work with that and keep the notes within the business. So when you're talking about sharing and you want to share an entire notebook, an entire workspace, be thoughtful about, who do I want to have access to that, and so which method would I choose to share that. I can also share individual notes. So I have lots of clients who aren't Evernote users. I work with a lot of folks who aren't Evernote users, and so sharing a whole notebook with them might be a little much, but I do frequently want to be able to share individual notes. And there are a variety of ways that I can do that. And when I right-click on a note or control-click on a note, I get to see all my sharing options there. Among those are the items to be able to give a public link to it, share it on social media, or even just email a note. I email notes quite a bit. I'm in a women's culinary organization. I took minutes at our annual meeting the other day, and then I emailed those to the president so she could disseminate them out. So using that note sharing is also very helpful. And there's going to be some new ways to share notes in the future at the Evernote conference, and then on the blog on October 2nd, Evernote announced a new feature that will be rolling out publicly later this year called Work Chat. And that will allow you to comment and chat around notes and notebooks within Evernote. If you've ever used Google Drive, it's similar to the commenting that you can do in that with Google Docs, but you'll be able to do that within Evernote. And so that'll be another really great way to add comments and give feedback on notes and notebooks. So sharing is an important part, and part of that sharing is I want to share the contents of notes, but I also may want to share and work with documents, and those might be Microsoft Office documents or PDFs or other things. For example, with our cookbook, we have a plan that says when all the photo shoots are and which recipe will be tested by when. That's all in Excel spreadsheet because it is very complex. But we share that together by having that in a note, because we have that project notebook. It's our master workspace for the cookbook, and so we have that as an attached document. The nice thing about these attached documents is even if I'm on a computer or a device that doesn't have Excel, I can preview that item from within Evernote. So particularly with the Microsoft Office documents, it's easy to preview, the same with PDFs, with images. Or if I need to work with and update the document, I can download it. And I can download that, make my changes, and then re-upload it. I also have the option to open it within from Evernote into Excel so that I can make changes. So when I want to update our timeline for the cookbook, I can go find it in Evernote, open it in Excel, make those changes, and save. The one caveat with this is you want to be careful. I would want to let Lillian and Sandra know that I'm editing the Excel spreadsheet so they don't try to do it at the same time. And so that is an important thing to note, because it would be easy for us to overwrite or to create conflicts. And so I do want to make sure that we are coordinating about who is updating when. So I do want to be a little careful with that. But it's nice to have everything in one place and not have to go dig separately and be able to make the changes from right there in Evernote, in our master workspace, in that notebook that we've shared. So really great. So how do I know who's making changes to what? The activity feed. The activity feed is the little satellite at the top of your screen in Evernote, and through that you can see who's making changes to what and when. So every time I come into Evernote, I'm checking that activity feed to see, oh look, there's 7 updates. Oh, Lillian's changed this, or Stacy's changed that, so that I know if I need to go check something out. And so this becomes an important kind of check-in for you in Evernote. You can also check the note history for individual notes, but the activity feed's an easy way to see what's going on day to day. So those are some of the core skills for being able to work effectively together and collaborate together. And, oh, one more, note counts. This is another way to kind of tell when something's happening in a notebook. For example, I tend to have weekend scanning parties where I'll scan all my receipts in. And poor Lillian opens up Evernote and sees that the receipts to reconcile has ballooned over the weekend to 114 notes. I typically hear about that afterwards. And so these note counts are an easy way to tell when there's been activity. I usually am not going to notice when it's increased by 1 note, but if one of us went on a blog rampage and decided to write a bunch of posts, I would notice if the website notebook went up to 30 or 35, because that would be a big increase for us. So this is another way to just kind of eyeball and check in. Gosh, I've got quite a few notes in there. So another great way to just kind of keep tabs on what's going on. So those are some of the core skills. Just want to check in and see if we have any questions before I dive into workflows. So just a couple of key things. Again, maybe review for some of you power users, but great skills to have for those of us who are newer to Evernote.
I think we're good.
Type questions into the Q&A pod. Yeah. Stacy, did you have something?
No, I think I was just going to let you know I think it's good. I think you're ready to move on.
Okay, good. Little coffee.
Everybody's clear.
Everybody's clear. Well, I do love the note counts. Setting those up on the view menu is really helpful. It's a good check for me. During a really busy week, I forget to empty my inbox, and so it's a good check to me. Oh gosh, I've got 17 things in there. I've really been sending a lot to Evernote and not processing. I need to stop and check in and get that taken care of. So those note counts can be really helpful for that. Just making sure you stay on track. So Stacey and I have sort of divided this up, and I'm going to talk about collaborating with notes and Stacy's going to give some great notebook examples. A couple of different things here. The first example I'm going to give is how Lillian and I work together. So we rarely sit next to each other. For a little while, we were working side by side 1 day a week, sometimes 2, but now I'm working on a big contract and I'm gone most of the time. So we really depend on Evernote to keep ourselves coordinated. And this isn't dissimilar than the business for many of you, that you are working with colleagues spread out across the country, not working side by side. So those collaboration tools really become critical. When I took on this new contract, we realized that we needed a different way to kind of organize ourselves, because one of the things that we've been doing very effectively for over a year is that we've been using a weekly meeting agenda to decide what we needed to talk about in our next weekly meeting. And you can see a couple of examples of those here. And with the weekly meeting agenda, we put the date, we put a reminder date on it. I can see one of the reminders is off in this example, so I'll have to fix that. But we put a reminder on it that's dated, so it shows this is when we're meeting next. We use a naming convention so we know exactly which meeting it's for. And all week long, we are both adding to that agenda, and we can see what we're going to be talking about so that we have a very clear, concise, good conversation. We right now are getting an hour together in that meeting each week, so we need it to be very focused, and that weekly meeting agenda helps us do that. And I'll show an example of that note on the next slide. We also are now doing a weekly checklist. So that weekly meeting agenda is what we're going to talk about, and that drives into actions for the next week. So, for example, on November 17th, we met and we went through our agenda, and through that, we came up with our action plan for the next week, and that becomes our weekly checklist. Lillian has a way that she organizes her to-dos. I use a Zendu, but we're both pulling from that checklist to create whatever we want as our to-do list. And we're going back and checking things off as we go along. So on Thursday, I can look at the weekly checklist and see what Lillian's done earlier in the week. I am not a micromanager. Lillian probably might like it if I micromanaged a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe not. But I'm very much like, you know what you need to do, go do it. Let me know if you need help. I'm not the kind of person who's going to be like, so did you do this? So did you do this? That's just not my style, and I've got a lot on my plate. So, you know, we've got the checklist. She can see when things are due. I can see when things are due, and it becomes a very independent way to organize ourselves. And so this is what that looks like. We have these notes stored in a shared notebook called Collaboration Space. It's where we tend to put things while we're working together, and then we have notebooks that things move to eventually. So the Collaboration Space is really our shared desktop. You might think of it as like our conference room table. We're putting the dated note reminders at the top so that they are easy to get to, and so if one of us is subscribed to the email reminders, they show up in there. And then we're using that naming convention so that weekly meeting agenda is driving that checklist for the next week, and you can see at that we're checking off as we go along. So this has been a great way for us to be able to work very effectively together, even though we are not next to each other every day. So this is one great example of collaboration and just using simple checklists to keep on track and be able to share information together. And here's another example. Again, this is a shared notebook, but here, instead of a checklist, we're tracking status with naming conventions. So this example shows our recipe notebook for the cookbook. No stealing ideas here. And what we've done on this, and boy, has this been a process. By the way, we're going to talk a lot about the cookbook in the next month's Google Hangout, because we're actually publishing it from Evernote, which is a pretty cool thing. But what we're doing here is we're using naming conventions within the notebook to tell us where we are. And so here I can tell what I need to test versus what Lillian needs to do, because we came up with a naming convention, and so we have whether it's ready for external testing, whether it's something I still need to develop, whether it needs to be revised by one of us, which means that the measurements and that kind of thing just need to be cleaned up. So here I can easily sort by the title and get all the items that I need to test or I need to develop or revise together, or easily see what's ready for external testing so I can assign that out to our recipe testers. But these naming conventions have been a great way. So if Lillian goes in and changes something, she's ready for me to test it, she changes it from Lillian LS revised to KW test, and now I know I'm ready to go. That shows up in the activity feed so I know it's ready. Or if she knows I has a really crazy week, she might email me and say, hey, this is ready to go, just to make sure I didn't miss it. So this has been a great way for us to organize 120 recipes to get them ready for the cookbook and to know very clearly where we are with each thing at each time. So just another good example of how you can collaborate in a different way for a different scenario. So again, just want to check in and see if anybody has any questions about those before we get going, but I don't see anything in the Q&A pod. Again, happy to answer those, but those are two straightforward examples of using a shared notebook, but using two different ways to collaborate and check in with each other remotely.
Well, and I'd just love to add that, you know, even if you aren't writing a cookbook, the skill that she's talking about there is so helpful in so many different scenarios. You know, I use that naming convention in my lead notebook, which Christy and I covered in the Managing Business Cards and Leads tutorial that we did, or hangout that we did. We cover several other examples in the book. It's just a really great skill that she's showing a good application here in terms of how that can assist in collaboration. And everybody has people that they coordinate with on meetings or agendas and tasks, and really Christy brought that to life with her use case there as well. And
and Stacy, I'll just jump in here and mention something, because you and I talked about this yesterday, and I originally said this was a tag example because we had talked about it being a tag example. And we originally had set up KW test tag, LS revised tag, but what we realized very clearly and why we went to a naming convention is that we needed to be able to sort the entire notebook and put it in the order that it was, not just pull a subset, which is what the tags do for me. And since I can't sort by tag within the notebook, it became very important to do the naming convention, not the tag. So I like tags. I probably would have used it, but we needed to be able to sort by where it was as well. And I wasn't going to do both tag and naming convention because that felt like too much work to me. So just as an example of why would you do a naming convention instead of a tag, we needed that sortability, and that's where we landed. So we did take a little back and forth to get to that place.
Well, it also shows the evolution of workflows too. You know, I mean, these things are organic and show, you know, how they can adapt to what the specific needs are. So I think it's a really great example. And Christy, I read Michael's question here, and just to clarify the question, let me show that we're answering it. That'll help so everybody can see it. I think maybe Lillian knows how to do that. I'm not sure how to promote it as a answer a question that we're answering. But Michael, your question is about Evernote Business, and really the difference between Premium and Business is data ownership. So Evernote Business is worth it if, in your case, you are the principal of an organization and you want to retain the data that your colleagues are creating should they move on to another role or another company. So what happens is Business kicks up the functionality to where you have an administrative panel where if a user leaves, you can remove their access to your business notebooks that they were jointly working with you on. So hopefully that answers it. In terms of actual like collaboration functionality, there's not much difference between Premium and Business, if any. The work, you know, some of the vocabulary and how you publish a notebook is slightly different, but how you actually work together does not change. It's really about data ownership, and that is the true value of Evernote Business. So if you're in a position where you have staff come and go and you want to retain that data so that the notebook doesn't go with them when they go, Business is for you. Do you have anything to add to that, Christy?
Yeah, kind of as part of that, so not only do the business notes live with me, but the uploading of the business notes is attributed to my business account. So where I think about that is we upload a lot of stuff into Evernote, as you can imagine, and I don't want that to eat up Lillian's personal Evernote account upload. I want her to be able to upload as much stuff as she wants as well. So in addition to the notes live with my business, and if Lillian were to do something else, which you're not going anywhere, Lillian, then she no longer has those notes, but I also am not eating up her upload limit with my business upload. So I think that's another piece of it for me. It's just kind of a different way to think about it.
Awesome. Okay, thanks for your question, Michael. Hopefully we answered it. I'm going to now take the screen and move into a couple of additional workflows for you. So Christy covered some very simple yet effective use cases. I certainly use those in mine as well. But sometimes there are greater needs, or you have more people involved or more data involved. And I'm going to cover some workflows with notebooks. So the first one that I want to cover is a case study that I use with a client of mine, John Wayne Enterprises, where they are basically managing, as you can imagine, John Wayne Enterprises has to give the authorization to use the John Wayne brand to a lot of people. Anytime 2020 wants to use a clip from John Wayne or his brand identity, they have to request permission to do that. There's a whole process for all of that. So we set up this workflow of notebooks that track status. So the permission, which we use a naming convention on the notebook level to identify that is a permission versus another workflow process that they have or any other workflow process in the business, but it's a permission. And then we use, again, naming conventions to force a sort order. It's very subtle, but you might notice that before the incoming there's a dot, and before the pending there's a dot, and then we have approved and declined. That's forcing a alphabetical sort of on the notebooks so that they're in the order that I want. The one at the top is really about a template notebook, which is another thing that I'll talk to you about in a second. But right now I want you to focus on the incoming, pending, approved, and declined. So what happens is we've set up a notebook for each phase of the permissions process. So if a request comes in, it goes to incoming. And as Christy showed us with the note counts, that's really helpful to know if there's new stuff in there or not. And then something gets acknowledged, meaning they open it and they start reviewing it, and it goes into the pending category. At that point, it's either approved or declined, and this process for them is much simpler than their licensing process, so there's not a lot of notes that are created around a permission. They're able to manage it through this. They don't need full notebooks for each permission request that comes in. They do a lot of them, as you can imagine, and when one is approved, they simply move it to approved, or they move it to declined if for some reason it's declined. And so status is tracked by actually having different staff members all have access to the same set of notebooks, and they move the note through the workflow by moving the notes from one place to another. And there's several ways to do that, from key commands to drag and drop to clicking and moving things around. So certainly it's very efficient and simple, and it works really beautifully. There's also this template template notebook that we've got up at the top called Forms. And what this is the list of forms that are really accessed on a very frequent basis as part of this process. And so they've got the W-9 that they need to send. They have the royalty reports, should that be part of this process. You know, these kinds of things are the stuff they send all the time. The stuff that might have lived on a shared server, there's no reason it can't go into kind of this template notebook that everybody who's collaborating and needs access to can access. Now, depending on the client, I'll set this up in one of two ways. There is a use case for making this a read-only notebook. especially when you do templates. So a key, kind of a power user tip is that if you have a template that you have put into this notebook, if you make it read-only, it forces your users to copy the note into a notebook that they can edit, so it always preserves the integrity of the template. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, feel free to just pop them into the question box there. But it's a really helpful tip, as opposed to if they, you want to preserve the integrity kind of these notes, and that's a good way to do it. Okay, in this case, it's not read-only. It's something that they work with, and they want to copy a lot, and there's not a lot of templates being used here. But certainly, that's a tip to consider as you're designing your own workflow. Okay, so that's the first one. You can actually use notebooks to kind of move them through the process and keep track of your data there and archive it over time. The next, and I love this one, this was actually a client that I work with, a consulting client. I taught him the skills, and then he came up with this, and I was like blown away by how actually effective, and it's a simple solution that's a really great use case for collaboration. So how many of you work with other people and they're sending you a text or they're sending you an email that says, I just put that on your desk, can you take a look at it, right? And here's the example that he sent me. He said, I put the groundbreaking cost on your desk. I think I captured it all. Please review. He's a developer, okay? And so in the traditional world, you would expect that this is a paper document that's in some kind of wire inbox on his physical desk in his office. But because he's an Evernote user, what this means is that she actually is using the desk terminology to reference the title of a notebook that he has called Desks. So what he has done is for each of his team, there's three of them that use Evernote. It's him, his assistant, and Anne, his accountant. So the three of them are working together a lot, and they each have a desk that they all have access to. And what they do is they put documents in there that instead of putting it on a physical desk. And it's so simple. It's such a great analogy, but then they made text, and when you get this text message, I put the groundbreaking costs on your desk, she's referring to Evernote. She's referring to right here, and in Renee's desk, he now knows to go in and look at it. So lots of ways to actually notify him that it's in there. He could simply see that it's in there. She can text him like she did because this had some urgency to it. You certainly could email the note, or you could look at the activity log as Christy showed, and work chat's going to open up some additional options. But the point is, this workspace is there that he knows he needs to go in and look at, and it's really effective. Now, to Christy's point earlier, knowing what the note counts are, this is a visual cue that is really, really important. And you can see in a simple solution here, this is a similar thing, kind of an inbox, outbox kind of thing. If there are note counts shown, it's much more informative if there's work to do. And this desks feature really helps in that. And this is on the Macintosh. This shows you the menu for making sure that show notes counts is visible, and by default it is not. So you're going to want to turn that on. It's also possible on the PC. The menu item is slightly different, but same feature is available. So be sure to turn that on, because it's really useful. When Renee looks here, he now knows he has 7 items in his desk versus Anne's desk, which has 12. Now, as it becomes something that he needs to incorporate into his own system, he might move it out of his desk, just like taking it out of the paper inbox or the wooden inbox that sits on your desk. He moves it into his system, or he'll move it back to Anne's desk, and it'll be back in her court. So great way to kind of collaborate. And I wanted to make the point that what Evernote really offers you is this ability to have communication around these documents in a visual way. So here's a document that needed to be reviewed in Anne's desk, and he wrote a comment with it too. Do you have time to go over this with me sometime tomorrow? That would be the sticky note that you used to put on the note on the paper in the old analog kind of a world. But in a digital manner, we're just taking that analogy and putting it into Evernote, and it translates really, really well. So I would recommend doing this if you have a small team or even a large team that you coordinate with and you want to all have a shared space. One key element is you have to understand that everybody that has access to that notebook is going to be able to see everything that's in that notebook. So if you need to have a private workspace between two people, make sure that only those two people have shared access to it. In this case, 3 people are all seeing this 3 notebooks. So if it's sensitive and the third person shouldn't see it, you're going to want to use a different channel. But the power in this is, and along with the simplicity, is noteworthy. And then I wanted to just kind of end with this last slide, giving you guys some examples. I talked about this in my Evernote presentation, and there's more detail in it in the hour-long recording that I'm going to show you guys how to access next. But I wanted to show you kind of what my typical workspace structure looks like for a collaborative environment. I do collaborate extensively through Evernote, but it's not all collaboration. And so I wanted to let you know that for most clients that I work with, I set up a personal workspace that's just for me, a notebook that is just for me. I might also set up a shared workspace that's for me and my assistant or my other Evernote collaborators to work on. You know, Christy and I set up a book collaboration when we were drafting the book, and when we plan for these hangouts. You know, we have this shared workspace where we work, but I have my own notes about the book in, you know, my own ideas notebook about you know, that are just my space and my records. And then I also tend to share a notebook with the client as well, because obviously I'm doing a lot of Evernote consultations, so we're sharing information through Evernote, and they're on Evernote. And so I put data in there so that they can access it. So you can see it, and it'll vary depending on how much work or the complexity or the size of the job that I'm doing for someone. So on the left, the green bar, you can see there that I just set one up only as a workspace that's personal to me. But on the blue, you can see that I had my own workspace, and then I had a coordination notebook. And I use the words coordination, or my ideas, or shared, or with client, or these kinds of indicators in the name in order to tell me who has access to the notebook, and then kind of group them together. And I find that really functional for me, and maybe an idea that you find some value out of as well. So I just wanted to kind of give you some insight into my personal desktop and digital workspace here, and kind of how I manage my client work as well. Okay, so Christy, do you have anything you want to add to that? We're in another kind of logical break, or if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them over in the workflow. My point with this, which I mentioned earlier before you jump in, Christy, is really you can mix and match these. You know, mix and match these in a way that works for you, depending on the specific workflow you're trying to design.
Yeah, I really love that idea, Stacy, and you know, thinking about Evernote as a workspace, which I was so thrilled when they introduced that concept at the conference, because that's how I've thought about it for a long time, that this is kind of my home base, my digital desktop. And, you know, one of the first things that Lillian and I did was create that collaboration space where we could have those things that are our shared desktop. And I think about a big group desk where one of us is on one side and one's on the other, but it's where we drop things that need to be transcribed, or, you know, that draft mode kind of stuff. And then it has a permanent home. And so internally thinking about it like that is so great. But then I also love that idea of having both like an inward-facing and an outward-facing notebook with clients. So we have a place where we do our work, and then we have a place where we present to the clients what we've been doing. And that, I think, is also a really powerful analogy. And that can be with notebooks, or it can be with notes, that we have both of those, both of those dynamics. But even at the very minimal level, and thinking about a non-business example, having a place to co-plan things like the holidays, vacations, all that kind of stuff. Those collaborations aren't just work involved, and they make a big difference.
Yeah, it really does make a great difference. And it goes without, actually kind of an underlying current here too, is that when you adopt this type of structure as your digital workspace, the thing about it is your work is centralized, and then the findability of that data is amazing, you know, because Evernote's search and find is so strong. You get this added benefit of that that really can make your world so much more efficient. Not only the mobility of it, but the findability, and it just amplifies your productivity as a result of doing these kinds of workflows and collaborations. So one of the, probably the key reason that we're such a fan. So okay. I am going to reshare my screen and kind of close up with some materials. Obviously, we'll still take questions if you guys have any, but a couple of closing slides we want to, and resources we want to make you aware of. Again, this was the exact topic, effortless teamwork using Evernote for seamless workflows. A lot of collaboration workflows that I covered at the Evernote conference. Evernote recorded the session, and I paired that recording, which is pretty tight on my face, with my actual slide deck here at SlideShare. So you can get the slides, you can get the handout I reference, as well as the video and audio that I gave. And so if this is an interesting topic to you, there's even beyond what we covered today, several examples in my hour-long presentation there. So that will be really helpful for those of you that are serious about designing workflows in your own Evernote account. And then obviously, as we mentioned, we're thrilled to be in the Evernote market, and our book can now be found either in EPUB format through evernote.com, or you can get EPUB plus PDF, Mobi, or print at getuntethered.com. Again, the covers are different, but the content is identical. So please, if you are interested in improving and getting more details on the skill sets that Christy talked about in the workflows that we discussed, those are great resources for you. And then we encourage you to continue the conversation. The Facebook group's really the primary spot where we have a fluid conversation, and then you find out about the Hangouts and such on Google Plus and YouTube, and we push our content out on Get Untethered and answer questions there as well on Twitter. So.
For the newsletter, because we're sending out, you know, Stacy and I both spoke at the conference, and we're writing blog posts regularly, and the newsletter is a great way to kind of get that all in one monthly digest. And we just send one email a month, so it's not like we're spamming you. But it announces the next Hangout, has a link to the current Hangout, all that good stuff. So sign up for the newsletter.
Okay, and then we're going to have our last hangout of the year with our holiday theme here, my little candy stripe, red and white, and really interesting topic, very different from what we've talked about before. We're going to be talking about publishing and content management with Evernote. So books, blogs, and more. And it's not just publishing in the sense of publishing a book, which is something we are going to cover, because there's some great integration partners that really make working with content a beautiful thing in Evernote. And so we're going to discuss those. We're going to cover blogging with Evernote and one of their integration partners there. We're going to cover publishing with Evernote. And then social media. How many of you struggle with that, right? And finding content, getting it scheduled, collaborating, crafting that content, doing all of those kinds of things. We're going to really talk a lot about content. And it's a very different kind of session, because we're going to be, again, talking with a lot of integration partners about some of those. But it's going to be a great topic and really show you some of like these things that Evernote can do that you might have had no idea about. And so with that, I'll let Christy kind of wrap it up and see if she's got anything to add. But thank you for watching.
Yeah, no, I think next month is going to be really exciting. We published our Untethered with Evernote blog using Evernote and Pistachio. We're going to talk about creating books with Evernote and Fast Pencil, and again, the social media aspect. So I think it's going to be a really fun hangout, and it's there's some of this is previewed a little bit on the Evernote blog if you wanted to check it out beforehand. But I think this is a very exciting way to use Evernote that's just getting started. So I think this will be a really fun, kind of cutting-edge hangout for the holidays.
Agreed. And we have a snazzy design with our hangout as well. Okay. Well, thank you for watching. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And till next time, we'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.